Hi, and welcome to another educational session. Today I'm going to focus on italic calligraphy and I'm going to write a quote for the first time with all of you. I'm going to be using walnut ink. In this case, it's a very dark walnut ink. I'm using a browser nib 3 millimeters, but you are more than welcome to use an alternative broad pen, such as a Pilot Parallel Pen 3 millimeters as well. And I normally use a red fine liner. Okay, let's start slowly. So the guidelines that you see in here are my own blank guidelines. And if you would like to get them, you can follow the link on the description on this video, which it will take you to my email newsletter currently hosted on Substack. And once you subscribe, you will be able to download a comprehensive free PDF file that contains a set of blank guidelines like this one, and for different calligraphy styles, and a list of visual recommended materials as well. Okay, so I'm going to attach a paper to my guideline as I normally do, so I can work on top of the lines and then the end is a clean result. If you want to learn more about what all these sections and lines mean, there is another video on my Italic Calligraphy playlist that explains all these sections. It's the first quoted that I shared with all of you. Excellent. I'm going to be attaching the paper together. I normally use a fancy paper clip, but I'm currently traveling, so I don't have a lot of fancy stuff, but I just have a regular paper clip that it will do the job. Now the next movement, after pinning everything together, I'm gonna zoom in, and now I'm gonna show you the quote I'm gonna be working on today, which I have penciled down to avoid making spelling mistakes. The quote says, "Do something different until something better comes along." And this quote is by Julia Cameron. I'm gonna add a comma, do something different, comma, until something better comes along. You can find this quote in the name of the author, also on the description on this video. Okay, let's start very, very slowly. So I'm gonna start with my browser 3 millimeters. I'm gonna dip the pen and get some ink, and I'm going to start with a capital. You can start with a lowercase if you prefer, or you can start even writing with a pencil. I almost forgot, I always use a folded paper to protect the page from my own skin, so I'm gonna do that as well. And now I'm gonna position the pen more or less at 45 degrees. And from here, I'm gonna create the first vertical stroke and down. Okay. From here, I'm gonna start inside the X height, and I'm actually going to repeat this movement and then down and up. Okay, now yes. From here, I'm pushing upwards, closing, keep rounding, very generous with the movement and closing in here. And you can see that you obtain the thick and thins in different positions based on the angle of my pen at writing. Okay, now I'm gonna start moving because this is gonna occupy quite a bit of space. So let me reposition my body again. Okay, the first lowercase letter or minuscule is O. So I'm going to focus on the writing and stop talking as I want to get into the flow of my writing, which is what I recommend you do as well. That is a lot of ink. First note to self. Let me move slightly. Something I'm writing this for the first time, so I'm encountering every pair of letters for the first time while writing. So I can see there is a lot of ink in here, so I have to be careful for the next time. Okay, let me move the paper a little bit more to something different. I don't know if it's gonna fit, but I'm gonna try to write it on the first line and see what happens. Something else I didn't mention is that today I'm using regular copy paper and not Canson Excel. So I can see that the mark on the paper is also very different. I'm going to do a variation in here because I have two F's next to each other. Do something different, comma. I'm gonna break the line now. So I'm gonna move again and go to the beginning of the line. You can see. Do something different until, let's move up slightly. Something better. So I have a repetition of the word above. Okay, until something better. Let's try to fit it in again and see if it's possible. Here I'm going to have a collision. So because of this collision between the ascenders and the B, I'm changing my mind now and I'm going to go for the third line. Okay, so based on the context that I have so far. All right, until something. Okay, let's start up here. Comes. Along. Okay, last word. Sorry, last letter. And yes, last word as well. Okay. Now, let's look at the writing and let's talk about the composition, the content, and what other things can be done. All right. So, as I mentioned before, first of all, this is regular copy paper, ATGSM. Secondly, I have too much ink on the first O, so this is note to myself to be very careful with this, with the ink for the next time. All right, I'm happy with the D because it has quite a big volume. This D follows the old style proportions of Roman capitals, so in this case, it's it's working well. Then something. The rhythm is very constant based on the width of my O in here. I don't want to mess up. Okay. Based on the width of this O, I try to replicate same widths across every other letter and paying attention also to the space between each pair of letters, and there is a consistency between the counter form and the space between the letter forms. With the M, which are letters that are straight and letters that are rounded, with the M, I try as much as possible to create two arches that are very similar to each other, or two shoulders. Uh, some letters are rounded, some letters are straight, but the space between them is quite consistent, so it works pretty well. In here, I decided on the go to add a bit more dynamism. This ligature, which is two vertical stems with one continuous horizontal stroke that unites them. That's a ligature between the first and second F. This could also be inverted so that the top F is lower and the second F is higher, and then it will invert the direction. So it's okay if it's this way. It's also okay if it's the first is shorter and the second is taller and so forth. So you can play around with this type of variations that are a bit more playful and bring more customization into your work. I need to be very, very mindful with how much I stretch to the right. I branch out to the right with the shoulder of the R so that I keep a consistent space between the R and the E and also between the E and the R, so it's not really off and so forth. Okay, now until something. So these two words obviously are the same. So in here the challenge is writing the words that are quite similar to each other. Of course, it's never going to be exactly the same, but they are quite similar and there is a very constant rhythm between them. Okay, so the U, again, the N, and the space between them is quite constant, so it works really well. Now, I decided to create this third line because this is the space of my descenders, and the F came below that. And now the word better was coming up here and it was going to collide. And so then I took the decision of breaking the sentence in this section. I created a second ligature in here. So you might have noticed that I first created the vertical strokes and then with the horizontal stroke or the horizontal bar, I unite both of these T's. And again, the spacing is quite even, so it works really well. I don't worry so much about the R's that are at the end of the word because I have more room to play, but I worry and be very intentional about the R's that are inside of my words because that is going to determine spacing and I want to keep a consistent spacing between each pair of letter forms, okay? Comes and along. You notice that this G happens 3 times. I'm very happy with the first one. I'm very happy with the second one. I think the third one, it's okay. It could be just a touch wider if I look at the other two, but I'm okay. All of these G's have a very, very, very slight curvature on their spine going down. So work well. Okay, so I'm happy with the results so far, and this is a little bit of how I normally practice. Is a combination of being very present on the page and focused on the rhythm of my writing, and if possible, focus on the breathing while I'm writing. And then at the end of it, I look and I can analyze. But while I'm writing, I try to stop very little, try not to judge or point at things that happen, just keep on going. And then when it's done, then I can look at it and assess for the next time. The inner dialogue is pretty much the secret and the difference between you struggling a lot with your learning process or you enjoying the learning process. So I very much recommend the second one. Excellent. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.